Welcome, YouTubers, to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In this video, I'm going to work out 60 practice test questions involving fractions that should closely mirror what you should expect to see in the mathematics knowledge, as well as the arithmetic reasoning subtest of both the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, that is the ASVAB, as well as the pre-screening Internet Delivered Computer Adaptive Test. You should be mindful of the fact that more than half of your test can involve fractions, as well as the fact that on the actual test, you're not permitted to use a calculator or a reference sheet. Of course, in order to get the most from this video, you'll want to pause the video after I read a practice test question, attempt to solve the question on your own, and then resume playing the video to check your solution. Similarly, I want to mention this very quickly. Please stop wasting money on tutoring or access to online boot camps. Truth be told, the vast majority of you are smart enough to pass this very simple test on your first try, as long as you spend a few days to a month studying for it. And likewise, all the resources you need to study for this test are freely available on my channel already. For instance, if you struggled with the questions in this video, I'd strongly encourage you to go through my video called A Complete Review of Fractions. In that video, I show you how to add, subtract, multiply, divide fractions and mixed numbers. And of course, I'll put a link to that video in the description of this video. And with all that finally being said, let's go ahead and get started with these practice test questions. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge practice test question says, what is the reciprocal of 7? So the first thing we have to do in order to answer this one is express 7 as a fraction. It's a whole number, and to write any whole number as a fraction, you can simply place it over 1. Again, 7 divided by 1 is just 7. Now, in order to find the reciprocal, it's a very simple process. All we have to do is exchange our numerator and our denominator. In other words, the reciprocal of 7 is going to be 1 over 7. So this one is D, 1 over 7. This ASVAB PiCAT Arithmetic Reasoning practice test question says a pizza was cut into 12 equal pieces. A person who eats 1/3 of a piece ate what fraction of the total pizza? So first and foremost, you have to visualize a pizza. When you cut it into twelfths, each piece of pizza is 1/12 of the total pie. And now we're just going to translate this little statement right here to solve this one. A person who eats 1/3 of a piece. Well, we know a piece is 1/12. 1/3 of a piece of in math means multiply. So we're going to multiply 1/12 by 1/3 to get our answer. 1 times 1 is 1. 12 times 3 is 36. So someone who eats 1/3 of a piece of pizza eats D, 1/36th of the total pizza. This ASVAB PiCAT Arithmetic Reasoning practice test question says how many 5-pound bags of apples can be made from 1,600 apples if each apple weighs a quarter of a pound? So we have 1,600 apples. To figure out how much those weigh in total, we're going to multiply that by the weight of one apple, that is a quarter of a pound. Write 1,600 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Now cross reduce. 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 1,600 400 times. 400 over 1 is just 400 times 1 over 1, that's just 1. 400 times 1 is 400. So we have 400 pounds of apples. Again, each bag is going to have 5 pounds in it. So to figure out how many bags we're going to have in total, we're going to do this division, cross out our units. 40 divided by 5 would be 8. Just tack on that 0. So we're going to have 85-pound bags of apples. ASVAB PiCAT Arithmetic Reasoning practice test question says a bag of cement mix is 1/5 clay and the rest is limestone. What part of the cement mix is limestone? So in this case, we're going to take 1, which represents our bag of cement mix, and from that we're going to subtract 1/5, which is the part of the bag that is clay. Of course, we can write 1 as 5 over 5, which gives that a common denominator with 1/5. And now we can do the subtraction. 5 minus 1 is 4. So we know 4/5 of the bag is going to be limestone. We got to convert that to percent. Some of you know right away that 4/5 is the equivalent of 80%, which is going to be B. That's it. If you didn't know that, you could always say this. 5 times 20 would make this 100 as our denominator. 4 times 20 would make this 80. 80 over 100 is the same thing as 80%. There's multiple ways to figure this one out. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT in 60 seconds. It says if a box of bolts weighs 1 3/4 pounds, what is the weight of 12 boxes of bolts? So, of course, to figure this one out, we're going to do 1 3/4 times 12. As you can see, we're multiplying a mixed number by a whole number. In order to work this out, however, we want to convert both these to fractions. So let's start with 1 3/4. To do that, we're going to do 1 times 4, which is 4, plus 3, which is 7. So this is 7/4. To write 12 as a fraction, we simply place it over 1. Now we're multiplying two fractions, so we're just going to multiply straight across. This becomes 7 times 12 over 4 times 1. 7 times 12 is 84. You got to know your times tables for this test. 4 times 1 is 4. As it happens, this math is very easy to do. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So the correct answer to this one is A, 21 pounds. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says, what is the reciprocal of 0.40 and 5 2/3? Let's start with 5 2/3. First, let's convert this to an improper fraction. 5 times 3 is 15 plus 2 is 17. So this is 17/3. To find its reciprocal, you just flip-flop your numerator and denominator. In other words, the reciprocal is going to be 3/17. Cross out all these answer choices that contain something else for that one. Now, the fraction equivalent of 0.40 is going to be 2 fifths. To find its reciprocal, we do the same thing. We flip flop our numerator and denominator. That's going to be 5/2. Now, if you can't convert that to a mixed number, mentally do the long division. 5 divided by 2. This is going to be 2, which is 4. So this 2 is going to be our whole number. This remainder of 1 is going to be our numerator. This 2 is going to be our denominator. So this one is going to be D. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question. It says, what is the product of the reciprocals of 0.5, 1/4, and 3? So we have to know the fraction equivalent of 0.5 is 1/2. To find its reciprocal, we just flip it. So that's going to be 2/1. Reciprocal of 1/4, we just flip it. That's going to be 4/1. Reciprocal of 3. 3 can be written as a fraction as 3/1. Find its reciprocal by flipping it. That's 1/3. So we're multiplying together 2/1 times 4/1 times 1/3. Again, when you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. So this becomes 2 times 4, which is 8 times 1, which is 8. This is 1 times 1, which is 1 times 3 is 3. So now we have to convert 8/3 to a mixed number. We're going to do that via division. This becomes 8 divided by 3. 3 goes in 8 two times without going over. 2 times 3 is 6. 8 minus 6 is 2. So this is 2 2/3. So our answer is C, 2 2/3. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says, what is the product of the reciprocals of 1/3, -1/8, and -2? So let's start by finding the reciprocals of these. We're just going to exchange our numerator and denominator. In other words, the reciprocal of 1/3 is going to be 3/1. Do the same thing for -1/8. This becomes 8/1 for its reciprocal. To find the reciprocal of -2, place it over 1 and then do the same thing. That is, exchange our numerator and denominator. So this is 1/2. We got to find the product of these reciprocals. So that means we're going to multiply them all together. This becomes 3/1 times 8/1 times 1/2. Multiplying fractions, so just multiply straight across. 3 times 8 is 24 times 1 is 24. 1 times -1 is -1. -1 times -2 is +2. 24 divided by 2 is 12. So this one is answer choice A, of course. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this. Rachel ran a half a mile in 4 minutes. At this rate, how many miles can she run in 15 minutes? So we're going to use a proportion. We know she runs a half a mile in 4 minutes. We want to know how many miles she can run in 15 minutes. Let's solve this one via cross multiplication. This comes 4x equals uh, 1/2 times 15 is going to be 15/2. All right, let's divide both sides by 4 now to get x by itself. This crosses out. Now we're actually dividing two fractions here. I can write 4 as a fraction by placing it over 1. When you divide two fractions, you follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. This becomes 15/2 times 1/4, which is the same thing as 15/8. Let's convert that to a mixed number. That's going to be 1. 8 goes into 15 one time with 7/8 remaining. So the answer to this one is A, 1 7/8. For this ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we know 1/6 of the students are in fifth grade, 1/3 are in fourth grade, and a quarter of the remaining students are in second grade. Let's first figure out how many students are in fourth and fifth grade. Just add 1/6 and 1/3. If you can't do that, mentally go ahead and find a common denominator, which is 6. This is 3 over 6, which reduces to 1/2. So 1/2 of the students are in fourth or fifth grade, which means 1/2 of the students are in some other grade. So let's figure out what 1/2 of 96 is. Again, if you can't do that mentally, just multiply straight across. It's 96 over 2, which becomes 48. So 48 of the students are in some other grade apart from fourth and fifth. Now we know that a quarter of those students are in second grade. So this becomes 48 over 4, which is 12. So 12 of the students are in second grade A. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says a pile of magazines is 3 feet high. If each magazine is 3/4 of an inch thick, how many magazines are in the pile? So in this case, we're given something in terms of feet as well as inches. The first thing I'm going to do is convert 3 feet to be in terms of inches by multiplying it by 12. Again, there are 12 inches in every foot. So next, we're going to take our 36-inch pile of magazines and divide it by 3/4, since that's how thick each magazine is. Follow the algorithm, keep, change, flip. 36, we keep that. We change from division to multiplication. Then we flip this to be 4 over 3. Write 36 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Cross reduce. 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 goes into 36 12 times. This is the same thing as 12 times 4, which is 48. So there are 48 magazines in this pile. ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question. We're going to do 15 and 1/2 divided by 5. Let's convert both of these to fractions. 5 can be written as a fraction by placing it over 1. 15 and a half as an improper fraction is 15 times 2, 30 plus 1, 31 over 2. Let's follow the algorithm, keep, change, flip to divide these two. You keep 31 over 2 the same. You change from division to multiplication. You flip this bottom fraction to be 1 over 5. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. So this becomes 31 over 10. Let's do this long division to convert this back to a mixed number. 31 divided by 10. This is 3. This is 30. This is 1, so we have enough to write our mixed number. This 3 is going to be our whole number. This 1's going to be this 10 is going to be our denominator. So he worked for 3 hours and 1/10 of an hour. What is 1/10 of an hour? That's going to be 1/10 times 60, since there are 60 minutes in an hour. Place this over 1. This becomes 60 over 10, which is 6. So 1/10 of an hour is 6 minutes. So he worked B. This ASVAB math practice test question says this: if 1/8 divided by 1/4 equals C, then what is C? So in this case, we're dividing two fractions, notably 1/8 by 1/4. When you divide fractions, you have to follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. Keep refers to this fraction in the numerator. You keep it the same, so we'll keep 1/8 as 1/8. Change refers to the operation of division. You change it from division to multiplication. And flip refers to the fraction in the denominator. You flip it. So instead of being 1 over 4, it's going to be 4 over 1. Now that we've done that, we're just multiplying two fractions together, which means we're going to multiply straight across. Notably, this is going to become 1 times 4 over 8 times 1. 1 times 4 is 4. 8 times 1 is 8. You can reduce this by dividing out a common factor of 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So the answer to this one is clearly B, 1/2. For this ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we have to do 16 and 1/2 divided by 5. Let's convert 16 and a half to improper fraction. 16 times 2 is 32, plus 1 is going to be 33 over 2 divided by 5. Make 5 a fraction by placing it over 1. Follow the algorithm, keep, change, flip. Keep 33 over 2 the same. Change from division to multiplication. Flip 5 over 1 to be 1 over 5. This becomes 33 over 10, which you should be able to convert to a mixed number like so. That's going to be 3. 10 times 3 is 30 with 3 left over. So this is 3 3/10. Now we got to convert 3/10 to be in terms of minutes. So we're going to multiply it by 60. Place this over 1. 10 goes into 10 one time. 10 goes into 60 6 times. 3 over 1 is 3 times 6 over 1, which is 6, so 18. So this is going to be 3 hours and 18 minutes, which is answer choice C. ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says if during the month of May, 30 of the 120 cars delivered to a dealership were white, then what percent of the delivered cars were white? So in this case, we know 30 of the 120 cars that were delivered to the dealership were white. So we got to convert this fraction to a percentage. First thing I'm going to do is cross out these corresponding zeros, which leaves me with 3 over 12. And then I should recognize that 3 and 12 have a common factor of 3, so we can reduce this even further. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And you should know that the decimal equivalent of 1/4 is 0.25, which is the same thing as 25%. Again, I strongly encourage you to learn some of the common fraction to decimal and percent conversions. And for that reason, I'll put a link to this chart in the description below. Of course, I also have a video where I show you how to make these conversions manually if you need to. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB says this: a pizza was cut into 8 equal slices. A person who eats one half of one piece ate what fraction of the total pizza? So I know many of you could solve this one mentally. That said, I want to make a quick sketch in case you haven't worked with fractions in a long time. Again, this pizza is cut into 8 equal pieces. So that means each slice represents 1/8 of the total pizza. So we know that each slice is 1/8 of the total pizza. How do you figure out what 1/2 of 1/8 is? If you eat half a slice, you just take 1/8 and you multiply it by 1/2. Okay, you're just multiplying fractions here, so you can multiply straight across. 1 times 1 is 1. 8 times 2 is 16. So if you eat 1/2 of one slice, that's 1/16 of the total pizza. ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question. We're trying to find the average of 1/2, 1/4, and 1/6. To find the average of numbers, you add those numbers up and divide by how many numbers there are. There are 3. Let's add these fractions now. To add fractions, of course, they have to have a common denominator. 2, 4, and 6 have a common denominator of 12. To write 2 as 12, we multiply it by 6, so this becomes 6 over 12. We have to multiply this by 3, so this becomes 3 over 12. We have to multiply this by 2. This is 2 over 12. Again, this is all divided by 3. Let's add these fractions. 3 plus 6 is 9 plus 2 is 11. This is 11 over 12 divided by 3. Write 3 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Now follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. Keep 11 over 12 the same. Change from division to multiplication. Flip this bottom fraction to be 1 over 3. Multiplying fractions is straightforward. You just multiply straight across. 11 times 1 is 11. 12 times 3 is 36. So the average is D, 11 over 36. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question, we're trying to find the product of the reciprocals of 2/3, 1/8, and 2 2/5. So first, let's find the reciprocals. Again, to find the reciprocal, you just flip-flop your numerator and denominator. So this one is 3 over 2. This one is 8 over 1. We got to convert this to an improper fraction to find its reciprocal. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 2 is 12. So this is 12 over 5. Again, its reciprocal is flip-flop, so it's going to be 5 over 12. Now we're going to multiply our reciprocals together like so. We have 3 over 2 times 8 over 1 times 5 over 12. You should be able to do this one mentally. 8 times 5 is 40. 40 times 3 is going to be 120. 2 times 1 is 2 times 2 is 24. If you can't see this one, both of these have a common factor of 6. This reduces to 20 over 4, which is 5. So this one is A5. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says the reciprocal of 3 1/5 is. So we have 3 1/5. The first thing we're going to do is convert this to an improper fraction, and then we'll find the reciprocal of the improper fraction. To write this as an improper fraction, we do 3 times 5, which is 15, plus 1, 16 over 5. Now, to find the reciprocal without knowing the technical definition of what a reciprocal is, all you do is flip flop your numerator and denominator. So the reciprocal, in other words, of 16 over 5 is simply 5 over 16. So this one is going to be B. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says, what is the reciprocal of 2 over 13? So the quickest way to find a reciprocal of a fraction is simply just to exchange your numerator and denominator. In other words, the reciprocal of 2 over 13 is 13 over 2. This is an improper fraction, so the next thing we have to do is convert this back to a mixed number via long division. 2 goes into 13 6 times without going over, given that 6 times 2 is 12. 13 minus 12 is 1. So let's write this as a mixed number. This 6 is going to be our whole number. This remainder of 1 is going to be our numerator, and this 2 is going to be our denominator. So this one is B, 6 1/2. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says, what is the reciprocal of 0.40? So you should know that the fraction equivalent of 0.40 is going to be 2 fifths. Of course, I included this chart in this video that shows you the conversions between common fractions, decimals, and percents. I strongly encourage you to look at this before you take the test and try to commit these to memory. I'll include a link to this chart in the description of my video. Now that we have converted 0.40 to a fraction to find the reciprocal, we just flip flop our numerator and denominator. So that's going to be 5 over 2. That's not answer choice because we have to convert this to mixed number. To convert this to mixed number, we can do long division, notably 5 divided by 2. 2 goes into 5 2 times without going over. 2 times 2 is 4. 5 minus 4 is 1. So this 2 is going to be our whole number. This remainder of 1 is going to be our numerator, and this 2 is going to be our denominator. So this one is D, 2 1/2. This ASVAB PiCAT Arithmetic Reasoning Practice Test question says, if a barrel has a capacity of 100 gallons, how many gallons will it contain when it is 2 fifths full? So we're going to take 100 gallons and we're going to multiply it by 2 fifths. Of course, to make this math a lot easier to do, let's place 100 over 1 so we can cross reduce. 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 100 20 times. This is 20 over 1. 20 divided by 1 is just 20 times 2 over 1, which is just 2. 20 times 2 is 40, so the correct answer to this one is D, 40 gallons. You have to be able to work with fractions for this test. They show up almost in every other problem. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question says this: the lengths of the sides of one triangle are 3/4 the lengths of the sides of a similar triangle. If a side of a larger triangle is 36 inches, how long is the corresponding side of the smaller triangle? In other words, we got to figure out what 3/4 of 36 inches is. So that's going to be 36 times 3 over 4. If you want to rewrite 36 as a fraction, you can place it over 1. Again, 36 divided by 1 is just 36. Now we can cross out corresponding values. 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 36 9 times. This is 9 over 1, or just 9, times 3 over 1, which is just 3. 3 times 9, I hope you would know, is C, 27 inches. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: the lengths of the sides of one triangle are 2/3 the lengths of the sides of a similar triangle. If a side of the larger triangle is 24 inches, how long is the corresponding side of the smaller triangle? So for this one, we're going to have to figure out what 2/3 of 24 inches is. In other words, we're going to do this 24 times 2/3. As you can see, we're multiplying a whole number by a fraction. To make this a little bit easier, let's rewrite 24 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Again, 24 divided by 1 is just 24. To make this math even easier, we can cross reduce. We can say 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 24 8 times. What do we have here? 8 over 1, 8 divided by 1 is just 8, times 2 over 1, 2 divided by 1 is just 2. 8 times 2 is 16, so we know our answer is B, 16 inches. For the ASVAB and PiCAT, you have to be able to work with fractions. There's no way around it. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, you travel 800 miles during a 40-hour work week. If you spend 2 fifths of your time traveling, how many hours do you not travel? So again, you spend 2 fifths of your time traveling. That means you spend 3 fifths of your time not traveling. If you couldn't do that mentally like I just did, you would do 5 over 5 minus 2 over 5 to get you 3 over 5. Now we have to figure out what 3 fifths of a 40-hour work week is. So we're going to do 3 fifths times 40. Of course, we can place 40 over a 1, which enables us to cross reduce this. 5 goes into 5 one time. 5 goes into 40 8 times. 3 over 1 is just 3. 8 over 1 is just 8. Again, 8 divided by 1 is 8. 3 times 8 is 24. So the correct answer to this one is A. You spend 24 hours of your 40-hour work week, which is 3 fifths of your work week, not traveling. This ASVAB PiCAT Arithmetic Reasoning Practice Test question says, if a box of screws weighs 2 3/4 pounds, how much does 16 boxes weigh? So to figure this one out, we're going to do 2 3/4 times 16. To make this math a little bit easier, I'm going to do 2 times 16, then I'm going to do 3/4 times 16, and I'm going to add those results together. 2 times 16, you should be able to do mentally. That's going to be 32. 3/4 times 16, let's write 16 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Now we can cross reduce. 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 16 4 times. 3 over 1 is just 3. 4 over 1 is just 4. 3 times 4 is 12. Let's add these together. This is 4, this is 4. So those 16 boxes weigh 44 pounds in total. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says Jerry walked the dog from 6:40 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. one day. If he was paid at the rate of $6 per hour, how much did he earn that day? So first we have to figure out how long he worked for. He worked walking the dog from 6:40 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. That's 50 minutes out of 60 minutes. In other words, if we cross out those corresponding zeros, he worked for 5/6 of an hour. We know he gets paid $6 an hour. So if we multiply this by 6, we'll figure out how much he made that day. This is very easy to do. Place 6 over 1 to make it a fraction. Cross out these corresponding sixes. Again, 6 goes into 6 one time, 6 goes into 6 one time. This is 5 over 1, or just 5, times 1 over 1, which is just 1. So in other words, he made 5 times 1, or B, $5 to walk the dog that day. For this ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we know our security guard worked for 3 hours and 40 minutes out of 60 minutes. We can reduce this by crossing out these corresponding zeros, then dividing by a common factor of 2 to reduce this to 3 hours and 2/3 of an hour. Now we got to multiply 3 hours and 2/3 of an hour by his hourly rate of $12 per hour. To make this math a little bit easier, I'm going to do 3 times 12. 3 times 12 is 36. Then I'm going to do 2/3 times 12 separately. 2/3 times 12. Place 12 over 1 so we can multiply straight across. This is 24 over 3. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So he made 36 plus $8, or B, $44 for working that Saturday. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says a child is 2.5 feet tall. Child's mother is twice as tall as the child. How tall is the child's mother? So since this is an easy question, I'm going to solve it 3 ways. So first of all, you should be able to solve this one mentally. 2.5 times 2 is going to be 5 feet tall. That said, if it's test day and you're a little bit nervous, you could do 2.5 times 2. Move our decimal 1 time to the right. This becomes 25 times 2, albeit with 1 decimal to move. 5 times 2 is 10, carry a 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Bring that decimal back in, so we got our 5 feet that way. You could also do 2.5 times 2. Of course, this is going to require you to convert this to an improper fraction. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, so this is 5 over 2 times 2 over 1, which is 10 over 2, or 5. So no matter which way you decided to solve this one, you arrive at the same answer. And of course, all these methods take more or less the same amount of time. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says out of 20 attempts, a basketball player scored 8 times. What percent of his attempts did he score? So in this video, I'm going to show you 2 ways to solve this one, and then I'm also going to briefly discuss a third way to solve it. So of course, he scored 8 out of 20 times. If you wanted to, you could say, well, those have a common factor of 2. And when I divide out that common factor of 2, this becomes 4 out of 10. And you should know that 4 out of 10 is 0.4, which is the same thing as 40%. The other way to view this one is like this. You have a basketball player who scored 8 out of 20 attempts. If you multiply this by 5, this becomes 100. And you have to multiply this by 5, this becomes 40. 40 out of 100 is also 0.4. Now, the third way to solve this one is to say you have a basketball player who scored 8 out of 20 times. View this as long division as 8 divided by 20. And if you do this long division, you'll notice that this becomes 0.4. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to figure out what the reciprocal of 7 is and the reciprocal of 3 1/5. Let's start with 7. The first thing I'm going to do is write that as a fraction by placing it over 1. Again, 7 divided by 1 is just 7. To find the reciprocal, we're just going to flip-flop these two. Reciprocal of 7 over 1 is 1 over 7. Let's do the same thing for 3 1/5. First thing we have to do, however, is convert this to an improper fraction. We do that like this. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16. So this is 16 over 5 as an improper fraction. Now to find the reciprocal, let's just do a flip-flop here. This becomes 5 over 16. So our two reciprocals are 1/7 and 5 over 16, which is answer choice D. Solve this ASVAB math knowledge practice test question in 60 seconds. It says this: what is the reciprocal of 0.25? Well, for this one, you're going to have to know what the fraction equivalent of 0.25 is, and that's 1/4. Likewise, you have to know how to find the reciprocal. To find the reciprocal of any number n, you simply take that number n and place it under 1 like so. All right, so let's go ahead and find the reciprocal of 1/4. That's going to be 1 over 1/4. Again, we're doing division involving a fraction here, so we're going to follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. We're going to keep this 1 the same, of course. We're going to change from division to multiplication like so. Then we're going to take the number in the denominator and flip it. So instead of writing it as 1 over 4, we're going to write it as 4 over 1. Let's think about what we're doing here. This becomes 1 times, what is 4 divided by 1? 4 divided by 1 is just 4. 1 times 4 is 4. So the answer to this one is B, 4. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says a homemade cleaning solution is 1/5 vinegar and the rest is warm water. What part of the solution is water? So if you can't solve this one mentally, try to picture it like this. Here's our bucket with our cleaning solution. It's 1/5 vinegar. That means it's going to be 4/5 water. And if you can't visualize it like that, just do 1 minus 1/5. Let's write 1 as a fraction as 5 over 5 minus 1 over 5. When you subtract fractions, you keep your denominators the same. 5 minus 1 is 4. So the correct answer to this one is D, 4/5. Hopefully you could have solved this one mentally. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says a bag of potting soil is 1/4 peat moss and the rest is dirt. What part of the potting soil is dirt? So for this one, again, we have one bag of potting soil. We know that a quarter of it is peat moss. So if we subtract 1/4 from 1, we'll know what part of it is dirt. Again, I'm not going to work this out. You should be able to do this one mentally. 1 minus 1/4 is 3/4. That said, you have to know that 3/4 has the decimal equivalent of 0.75, which is the same thing as 75%. That's answer choice C. I know many of you could solve this one mentally, but if you need a visual image of this one, again, here's our bag of potting soil. We know that a quarter of it is peat moss. That means 3/4 of it is dirt. And of course, that all equals 1 for the whole bag. Solve this arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if 35 of the 140 cars delivered to a dealership were blue, what percent of the cars were blue? So let's start by expressing this as a fraction. Again, 35 of the 140 cars delivered were blue. You should know that fractions can be converted to decimals and then expressed as percents pretty quickly. But let's start by reducing this fraction as much as possible. You should see that 140 and 35 have a common factor of 7. Specifically, 35 divided by 7 is 5. Likewise, 140 divided by 7 is 20. We could reduce this even more since these have a common factor of 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 20 divided by 5 is 4. You got to know that the decimal equivalent of 1/4 is 0.25, which is the same thing as 25%. So the answer to this one is C, 25%. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says it takes 3 coffee cups to make 1 quart. If a coffee cup is a half filled, what part of a quart is in the coffee cup? So at first glance, you might think this is a conversion problem. It's not. A coffee cup is a non-standard unit of measurement. That said, we're going to use a ratio to solve this one. Again, we know that uh, 3 coffee cups correspond to 1 quart. We want to know how many quarts are in a half of a coffee cup. So that's going to be our ratio there. Cross multiply, this becomes 3x equals 1/2. Solve for x by dividing both sides by 3. This crosses out. Again, right here, we have 1/2 divided by 3. I could write 3 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Then we could use keep, change, flip. 1/2 times 1/3 equals 1/6. So to answer this question, B, 1/6 of a quart is in a half-filled coffee cup given this ratio. ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says on Wednesday you hit the lottery and won $100,000. If you decided to keep $85,000 for yourself and give the rest to your family, what fraction of the total jackpot did you give to your family? So the total jackpot was $100,000, of course. And if you kept $85,000 for yourself, that means you gave 100,000 minus 85,000 or $15,000 to your family. All right, let's go ahead and reduce this fraction by crossing out our corresponding zeros accordingly. This reduces to 15 over 100, which is much more manageable. Of course, you should notice that 15 and 100 have a common factor of 5, so we can reduce this even further. 15 divided by 5 is 3, 100 divided by 5 is going to be 20. So this is going to be B, 3 over 20. That is, you gave 3/20ths of the total jackpot away to your family. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says a farmer received an offer to buy his 320-acre farm for $3,000 per acre. However, he only agreed to sell $96,000 of land. What fraction of the farmer's land did he sell? So first we're going to find out the total value of his land by doing 3,000 times 320. We're not going to do this because it's very tedious. Instead, I'm going to do 320 times 3. This is 069. 3,000 times 300 would be 900,000. So I know this has to be 960,000. So his land is valued at $960,000. He sold $96,000 worth of that land. So we got to reduce this fraction. Cross out this corresponding zero, this corresponding zero, this corresponding zero. This reduces to 96 over 960. These have a common factor of 96, of course. So this reduces to 1 over 10. So he sold 1/10 of this. ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says a movie theater has a maximum capacity of 105 people. If 75 people are already seated for the movie, then what part of the theater is full? So we know 75 of 105 people are already seated in the theater. So all we have to do is reduce this fraction. You should see that 75 and 105 have a common factor of 5. So let's reduce this by 5. 75 divided by 5 is going to be 15. 105 divided by 5 is going to be, well, 5 goes into 10 two times, 5 goes into 5 one time. So this reduces to 15 over 21. We can reduce this further by a common factor of 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 21 divided by 3 is 7. So 5/7 of the theater is already full. For this ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we have two similar triangles, and we know that the side length of one of the sides in the larger triangle is 15 inches. We want to figure out what the side length of the corresponding side in the smaller triangle is. So we're going to be solving for x. Of course, we also know, according to the problem, that the side lengths of the smaller triangle are 1/4 the side lengths of the larger triangle. So that's going to be 1/4 times 15. Place this over 1 so we could do this multiplication. This becomes 1 times 15, which is 15. 4 times 1, which is 4. Let's convert this to a mixed number via long division. 4 goes into 15 3 times without going over. 15 minus 12 is 3. This is going to be our whole number. This remainder of 3 is going to be our numerator. And this 4 is going to be our denominator. So this one is B, 3 3/4 inches. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we're told that we have a pi, which I'm going to represent with a circle right here. We're told that pi is cut in half, creating halves, of course. Then it's cut in half again, creating quarters. Then those quarters are cut in half again, and in doing so, we create eighths. In other words, each of these slices represents 1/8 of the total pie. We want to know if two slices are eaten, or two pieces are eaten, what portion of the pie remains? Well, 8 out of 8 represents the total pie. 8 divided by 8 is 1. We eat two pieces, so that's going to be minus 2 over 8. This becomes 6 over 8. Divide a common factor of 2 out to reduce this. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that means 3/4 of the pie remains. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says a pie was cut into two equal pieces. Each of the pieces was cut into halves again, and each of those smaller pieces was cut into two equal pieces. If two pieces of the pie were eaten, what portion of the pie remains? So first, let's find out how many pieces of pie we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of pie. Again, if you eat two of them, that becomes 8 minus 2 are 6 pieces of pie left. What portion of that is the pie? Well, let's reduce this by a common factor of 2. This becomes 3 over 4. 3/4 of the pie is left. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says 2,200 people attended a football game. If 3/4 of those who attended the game were not season ticket holders, how many were season ticket holders? So to figure out how many season ticket holders we had, we do 1 minus 3/4, which is going to be 1/4. Now we got to figure out what 1/4 of the 2,200 people who attended the game is. Write 2,200 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Multiplying two fractions, so just multiply straight across. This becomes 2,200 over 4. Do this long division to solve. 2,200 divided by 4. 4 goes into 22 5 times without going over. 4 times 5 is 20. This is 2. Drop down this 0. 4 times 5 would be 20, but if we drop down this other 0, 4 times 50 will be exactly 200 with no remainder. So 550 people of the 2,200 who attended the game had season tickets. For this ASVAB PiCAT Arithmetic Reasoning practice test question, we're trying to figure out how many students graduated with a C average if 1/8 of the students graduated with an A average and 1/2 of the students graduated with a B average. You can think about this as a pie chart if it's more helpful, but to find the fraction of students that graduated with the C average, we're going to do 1 minus 1/8 minus 1/2. So we need a common denominator. That's going to be 8. To write 1 as a fraction with the denominator of 8, that's going to be 8 over 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1 minus 1/8 minus, again, we're going to have a common denominator of 8, so we're going to multiply this by 4. And now we could do the subtraction. 8 minus 1 minus 4 is going to be 3. So 3/8 of this class graduated with a C average. Multiply this by the 800 students who graduated. Place this over 1, cross reduce. This is 1. This is 100. 3 over 1 is 3. 100 over 1 is 100. 3 times 100 is 300. So 300 students. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if the length of an edge of a cube is 2.5 inches, what is its volume? So to find its volume, we're going to take our edge length and we're going to cube it. You do have to know this formula for the test. Of course, we're going to convert this to an improper fraction so we can continue. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. So this is 5 over 2. Cube means you multiply by itself 3 times like so. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. 5 times 5, in other words, is 25 times 5 is 125. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. Now to get our answer, we got to convert this improper fraction back to mixed number. We do that via long division. 8 goes into 12 one time without going over. 12 minus 8 is 4. Drop down this 5, of course. 8 goes into 45 5 times without going over, given that 8 times 5 is 40 with a remainder of 5. So this is going to be 15. This is going to be our numerator, and this is going to be our denominator. So this one is clearly A, 15 and 5/8. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says a bread recipe calls for 3 1/4 cups of flour. If you only have 2 1/8 cups, how much more flour do you need? So to figure that out, we have to do 3 1/4 minus 2 1/8. Of course, you could convert these both to improper fractions, perform the subtraction, and then convert them back to mixed numbers. Honestly, that's too much work. Instead, we have to be smart enough to say that we can write 1/4 to be in terms of eighths pretty easily by multiplying it by 2. Again, 4 times 2 is 8. We'll do that to its numerator as well. In other words, 2/8 is the same thing as 1/4. Now we can perform this subtraction very quickly and easily. 3 minus 2 is 1. 2/8 minus 1/8 is 1/8. So the answer to this one is A. You need 1 1/8 more cups of flour for this recipe. ASVAB PiCAT Arithmetic Reasoning Practice Test question says if a baker doubles a recipe that calls for 5 3/4 cups of flour, how many cups of flour will be needed in total? So we're going to take 5 3/4 and we're going to multiply it by 2. That said, we're going to convert this to an improper fraction first. 5 times 4 is 20 plus 3 is 23. So this is 23 over 4 times 2. Write 2 as a fraction by placing it over 1. Now we just multiply straight across. 23 times 2 is going to be 46. 4 times 1 is 4. Let's convert this back to a mixed number via long division. 46 divided by 4. 4 goes into 46 11 times without going over. That's going to be 44. 46 minus 44 is 2. So let's write this as our mixed number. This 11 is going to be our whole number. This 2 is going to be our numerator, and this 4 is going to be our denominator. 11 2/4 is the same thing as 11 1/2, which is answer choice A. For this arithmetic reasoning practice test question, we're going to start by multiplying 7 1/3 by 2 1/2. To do that, we're going to have to write these as improper fractions. That's going to be 22 over 3 times 5 over 2. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. 3 times 2 is 6. 22 times 5 is 110. Now we're going to convert this back to mixed number. We're going to do that via Long division, 6 goes into 11 one time without going over. 11 minus 6 is 5. Drop down this 0. 6 goes into 50 8 times without going over, given that 6 times 8 is 48. So we have a remainder of 2 here. So this becomes 18 and 2 sixths, which is the same thing as 18 and 1/3. Let's do the subtraction to get our answer. 18 and 1/3 minus 7 and 1/3 is 11. So he throws the ball C 11 yards farther. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says on Monday the water was shut off 3 times for a quarter of an hour, 2/3 of an hour, and 2 3/4 hours, respectively. How long in total was the water turned off? So to solve this one, we have to add all these together. The easiest way to do this one is to start by adding 1/4 and 2 3/4. Again, 1/4 and 3/4 is just 1. And if you can't see that, do it off to the side. 3/4 plus 1/4 becomes 4 over 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. All right, so 1/4 and 2 3/4 becomes 3 plus 2/3. Now we could just add these like so. This becomes 3 and 2/3. So to answer this question, the water was turned off C, 3 and 2/3 hours in total. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says find the total thickness of 2 pieces of wood that a carpenter glued together. One piece is 5/16 inches thick and the other piece is 7/8 inches thick. So we're doing 5/16 plus 7/8. To add fractions, they have to have a common or the same denominator. 16 and 8 share a denominator of 16. So we're going to rewrite this one to have a denominator of 16 by multiplying it by 2. This becomes 14 over 16. When you add fractions, you keep the denominator the same. 15 plus 14 is 19. So now we got to convert this back to a mixed number via long division here. 16 goes into 19 one time without going over. 19 minus 16 is 3. This 1 is going to be our whole number. This 3 is going to be our numerator. This 16 is going to be our denominator. So the total thickness is 1 and 3/16 inches thick. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge practice test question says, what is the sum of 1/6 and 1/7? So we're adding these two fractions together. In order to add fractions, they have to have the same or a common denominator. 6 and 7 both go into 42, so that's going to be our common denominator. In other words, we're going to rewrite both of these with a denominator of 42. To make 6 42, we would have to multiply it by 7. We're also going to do that to its numerator, so this is 7 over 42. To write 7 as 42, we would multiply it by 6. Of course, we also have to do that to its numerator. So this is 6 over 42. When we add fractions, we keep the denominator the same. Then we just add our numerator. 7 plus 6 is 13. 13 is a prime number, so we can't reduce this fraction. This is B, 13 over 42. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says this: 13 over 4 equals which of the following decimals? So this improper fraction tells you what to do. Improper fractions can be read as follows: 13 divided by 4. Now all we have to do is work this out to get our answer. 4 goes into 13 3 times without going over. 4 times 3 is 12. 13 minus 12 is 1. To continue doing this long division, we're going to add a couple of 0 placeholders as well as a decimal. Bring that decimal into our answer, drop down one of our 0 placeholders. 4 times 2 is 8. 10 minus 8 is going to be 2. Drop down our 0 placeholder. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. Can't do any more, so we know our answer is 3.25D. This ASVAB PiCAT arithmetic reasoning practice test question says an electrician has a car payment of $300 per month, $225 of which goes toward paying off the principal and the rest goes toward the interest. What percent of his total payment is for interest? All right, so for this one, we know his total payment is $300. We got to figure out what amount goes toward interest. That's going to be 300 minus 225, which you should be able to do mentally. That's going to be $75. All right, now we just got to reduce this fraction and then convert it to percent. Again, both of these have a common factor of 75. So this becomes 1. What is 300 divided by 75? 75, 150, 225, 300. So this is going to be 4. You should know that the decimal equivalent of 1/4 is 0.25. which is the same thing as 25%. So this one is C, 25%. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says a plumber has a car payment of $250 per month, $225 of which goes to paying off the principal, and the rest goes toward the interest. What percent is being paid for interest? So if he pays 225 out of 250 for the principal, that means he pays 25, again 250 minus 225 is $25 toward the interest. Let's go ahead and place this over his total payment amount, that is 250. And by doing 25 divided by 250, we can convert this to a decimal and then a percent pretty easily. That said, you should see that we can also simplify this by a common factor of 25. 25 divided by 25 is 1. 250 divided by 25 is 10. This is the same thing as 0.1. You should know that, which is the same thing as 10%. In other words, 10% of his payment is for the interest. The answer choice is B. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says what percentage of the grid is shaded. So the first thing you have to do on a problem like this is count how many squares there are in total. Now you're not going to count every single square, of course. You're going to count how many there are vertically. There are 10 vertically. Then you're going to count how many there are across. There's 10 across. So now we know this is a 10 by 10 grid. In other words, there are 100 total squares. So that's going to be our denominator. How many are shaded? Well, there's 10 here. That's 20, 30, 40. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 45 of the 100 squares are shaded. 45 over 100 is the same thing as 45%. So the correct answer to this one is A, 45%. Again, never assume that they give you a 10 by 10 grid. This math knowledge practice test question says convert 24% to fraction. To convert percents to fractions, you can simply place that number that you're given over 100. So this becomes 24 over 100. Of course, we can see that this isn't one of our answer choices, which means we could probably reduce this fraction a little bit further. Specifically, you should see that we can divide our numerator and denominator by a common factor of 4. 24 divided by 4 is 6. 100 divided by 4, of course, is 25. 6 and 25 don't have any common factors, so that's as far as we can reduce that fraction. The answer to this one is A, 6 over 25. This practice test question says 192 is what percent of 600? Let's write this as an equation and then solve. 192 is equal. What percent is unknown? Call it P. Of is multiply 600. Divide both sides by 600 to get P by itself. This crosses out, leaving you a P on this side. Let's go ahead and reduce this fraction. You should know that 192 and 600 are both divisible by 3. This becomes 200. What's 19 divided by 3? That's going to be 6, and you're going to have a remainder of 1. 12 divided by 3 is going to be 4. All right, so we want to express this as a percent. So let's go ahead and write it as a fraction over 100. 200 divided by 2 is 100. 64 divided by 2 is 32. So as a percent, this is 32%. For this ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to figure out which of the following fractions is less than 25%, which is the same thing as 1/4 or 0.25 in decimal form. Let's just go from top to bottom. 2/5. Let's multiply this by 2 and this by 2. This becomes 4 over 10, which is 40%. That's bigger than 25%, of course. 1/3, you should know, is 33%, which is bigger than 25%. 5/16. Let's start this long division here. 5 divided by 16. Add a 0 and a decimal. 16 goes into 50 3 times without going over. 16 times 3 is 48. This is going to be 0.3 something, so I know this is bigger than 25%. What about 1/8? Well, what is 2/8? 2/8 is the same thing as 1/4. 2/8 is bigger than 1/8. So the correct answer here is D. For this math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to figure out which of these is the smallest fraction. So let's go ahead and multiply this by 2 to get started. This is 4/10, which is 0.4. Let's convert these to decimals via some quick long division. Add a decimal and a 0 placeholder. 9 times 4 is 36. We're not going to keep working these out because this is 0.4 something. This is exactly 0.4. Let's hope one of these is smaller. Add a decimal 0 placeholder, bring that decimal up. 7 times 4 is 28. We're not going to keep working it out. This is 0.4 something. 3 divided by 8, add a decimal 0 placeholder. 8 times 4 would be 32, which is too big. 8 times 3 is 24. So you should see that 0.3 is smaller than 0.4 something, exactly zero point 0.4 and 0.4 something. So the correct answer to this one is D. Question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, which of the following fractions is the largest? Right away, you should say that 7 out of 10 is 0.7, which may be the largest. 2 out of 5, you should know, is 0.4. That said, you should also be able to say that 2.5 out of 5 would be exactly 0.5. This, of course, is smaller than 0.7. Similarly, you should be able to say that 4 out of 8 would be 0.5. This is smaller than that, so it's smaller than 0.7. This last one's a little bit harder, so I'm going to revert to doing long division. I could read this as 13 divided by 16, add a decimal and a 0 placeholder, bring that decimal up. So if this is bigger than 0.7, we know D is the biggest fraction. Let's do 16 times 8 off to the side to see if it is going to be bigger. 8 times 6 is 48, carry a 4. 8 times 1 is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this is going to be 0.8 something. 0.8 something is bigger than 0.7.